Okay, we're going to go straight ahead here and start removing the top mount for the engine. I've already placed a jack underneath the oil pan and taken the bulk of the weight of the engine with that. You want to be careful to distribute the weight there with a piece of wood or similar so you don't puncture the oil pan. There's 5 bolts in total here to be slackened off. If you've got a nice set of air tools, that'll do it a lot easier than a bar, but I don't, so here we go. And once you've got them all loosened, you need to go ahead and spin them all the way out. That's the last one coming out there. Then need to go ahead and try and remove the top mount, which, if it's anything like mine, it won't do. Just raising the engine up a little more to see if it helps. Nope. And apparently just a bit more for good measure, don't know why. And still no. So a bit of head scratching and frustration later, result to a bit of brute force and ignorance. It does sometimes work. You turn it over and you find the culprit mounting peg. Next you need to go ahead and take the top part of the engine cover off, which also forms the upper part of the side mount. Raising the engine up again, not really sure why, and you saw me taking that vacuum hose out of the clip there as well. I think there's a total of either 4 or 5 bolts holding this in place. Some of them are a little bit hard to find. I think one of them is actually buried inside a hole in the top bracket. What you're not going to see in the video at this point is 2 things you should really do before you take this top part of the cover off, and that is to roll the engine over and put it onto time. You can just about see in the frame there that there is a hole through the bracket in which you can just about make out the camshaft sprocket, and if you wind the crankshaft round, there's a little dot punched into the edge of the sprocket, and when you can see that through the window, the engine is on time. You don't need to worry about any other marks, simply because if that one is visible through the window, then the crankshaft mark has to be in the right place as well, because camshaft spins twice for every once that the crank goes round. So if you can see that, the engine's on time. There isn't anything there to align it to. You just have to get it roughly centralised in the window, and then when you install the new belt, the marks on both the camshaft and crankshaft sprocket actually line up with marks that are printed on the new timing belt. So that's how you do that. The other thing you should do once you've got that mark visible through the window is put the engine locking pin in place. That fits through just underneath the starter motor and fits into a hole in the flywheel. I believe that there is a special tool for that. If memory serves, a 7mm drill bit got the job done. I think that's the last of the bolts in the bracket just getting taken loose there. It's also beneficial at this point if you go ahead and disconnect both of the coolant pipes from the water pump, because as you'll see when I go to remove this bracket, it kind of gets bound up on that coolant pipe there that runs back towards the firewall. You see me lowering the engine there. What I'm doing there is trying to improve access to the crankshaft pulley so I can go ahead and use my impact gun to take the crankshaft bolt loose. And what you can actually see me doing there is actually putting the engine onto time, which I should have already done. So there's me pointing out the mark and that it should point upwards. I neglect to put the pin in even at this point, so when I go ahead and try and impact the pulley loose, you'll notice the engine turning back the other way. Off camera, I did actually rectify the timing and place the engine cover back in place. So I could verify that it was accurate. See the engine shaking around there a little bit. Actually took quite a few tries with the impact gun to break it loose. It's not crazy tight in comparison to some other engines I've worked on, but to the best of my knowledge it's never been done before, so it did take some doing. What I'm doing there is just opening up the clip that holds that coolant pipe onto the water pump. I'm going to go ahead and remove it now. Just do your best to manoeuvre it around the rest of the engine spaghetti and store it out the way at the back there somewhere. Vacuum hose back where it's supposed to be. Okay, the next thing you want to do is go ahead and take the middle part of the timing cover out of the way. There's 2 bolts holding that in place. And then move down to the lower part of the plastic cover. I think that's 1 bolt. And once that's out of the way, what you can see me doing here is removing the nut from the tensioner and sliding the tensioner off its mounting peg. Then you want to go ahead and slowly walk the timing belt off the camshaft pulley. It's a little bit tighter than you might expect even with the tensioner out of the way, but in the end it ultimately doesn't really put up much of a fight, and there it goes out of the way. Good idea at this point if you go ahead and loosen the bolts holding the plastic elbow to the water pump, which you can see me doing here. That is if your new one doesn't come with one already attached. That just makes life a little bit easier. So if you're transferring that to the new pump, then you need to go ahead and loosen the bolts around the water pump. I'm just showing you the new one here so you can see where they're all located. Water pump didn't want to leave the car, so in the end, again, had to resort to a bit of brute force. Be very careful if you're doing this. You really don't want to damage the mounting surface on the engine, but I just couldn't get the thing out of there, so I had to get a pry bar to extricate it from its place. Put up a pretty good fight. I think that rubber coating on the water pump gasket helps to seal it in place. But ultimately no match for my determination to get it out of there. As you'll see here, absolute first for me, minor miracle, the gasket not only stuck to the water pump but came out in one piece.